Hi, it's Evelyn. I'm going to talk about choice and what we need to be mindful of when we're working with autistic kids. So this is something I put together specifically for people who are doing our Get Connected course, which would be running neuroaffirmative groups for autistic kids, supporting them like through social navigation and all of that. But it applies to anybody working with autistic kids, whether you're an SNA or a teacher or someone else working in school, whoever you are, or a parent even. These are all, kind of universal advice, let's say, on things we need to be mindful when we're working with autistic kids. And choice is one of these things. So some kids will be used to, this kind of pretend or manufactured choice. That's what I call it. Like when others pretend they're giving you a choice. So when someone says, would you like the red one or the green one? And then that's not really a real choice because there might be like 8 colors, but you've already like limited that child's choice by removing 6 of them from the set. So that's what I mean when I talk about like pretend choice. So truly child-led learning asks the child, which one do you want? That's real choice. So we might ask a child, what do you want to do today? And they get to decide. And yes, that can be really challenging to manage, particularly in group settings. But just because it's challenging doesn't mean it's not possible. So you can ask your group for ideas. So, if you're running a session, you can ask at the beginning of the session. And if you like to plan, then ask them for ideas at the end of the session so you can, plan for the following week if you're not someone who likes to kind of plan stuff on the spot. You can also like combine their ideas and topics and make really lovely sessions. Or you can explain, sometimes you might get like too many ideas that are just too much to work with, and then just explain, well, I'm going to try and fit all of these in over the series of sessions, going to try and be really fair and make sure everybody's ideas are heard. And we're going to do it that way. I might not be able to do everybody's next week, but your ideas will all be incorporated. And this means that, you're meeting every child's needs then, you're validating them, and you're giving them control over what they want to learn about. And these are things that I suppose run through neuroaffirming practice or neuroaffirming education. It's where you are constantly meeting the child's needs, validating, and giving them control, because that obviously ties in then with, autonomy and consent and respecting the child's boundaries, because we can talk all we want about teaching kids about consent unless we actually give them consent and respect their boundaries. Then the stuff that we're teaching isn't really going to have the same impact unless we're actually following through with our own actions as adults. So you can ask your group for ideas. Oh yeah, sorry, I said that. And just be aware. So here's a couple of things that you need to be aware of. What would you like to do today can be too vague for some of us. So being more specific is more helpful. Instead of saying something like, instead of saying, what would you like to do today? Because that's really vague. You might say instead, did anything come up for you this week with other people that you'd like to cover in the sessions? Or is there something that's been making you feel bad or confused for a while and you'd like us to work on together? So also to be mindful, there's that behaviorist kind of manufactured choice, which is usually couched in consequence language. And it looks like this. You have a choice. You can either do the bad behavior or not. If you do it, then the consequence is that you won't be back to the sessions. And if you don't do it, then you can stay. It's your choice. Now, that's obviously not a choice at all. That's just like behaviorism dressed up as choice, because obviously a child doesn't choose to do a bad behavior. So yeah, that obviously has no place in neuroaffirmative practice, but it's really worth bearing in mind that some of your clients may have been exposed to this previously and therefore may be reluctant to make choices for fear of consequence. It's also worth bearing in mind that some demand avoidant kids, or kids who may have issues with executive function from time to time, might also find choice difficult. In this instance, then actually limiting the choice can be helpful to them. And this is where, you know, one size fits all advice never works, because we're dealing with human beings. So, and it's also where we see how getting to know the children in our care is really, really important, so we can look and read and know their little signs and signals. So, you know, for example, you know, for some children, a long pause might be a signal that they're finding this difficult. Or you know, their stress responses, look out for their stress responses, and that will communicate to you if the kid is finding, you know, making a choice difficult. So there's also, of course, another little group of kids to keep in mind, and that are the people pleasers. So, you know, that might look like a child becoming overwhelmed, looking uncertain, because they're basically afraid to displease you by making the wrong choice. They're in their heads thinking, what will I say, because I don't want this person to be offended, or I don't want them to be hurt that I pick the wrong one. What would they like me to pick? And that's what's going on in that instance. Something I'm very familiar with. You know, so encouraging this type of child and explaining that there's no wrong choice and no consequence, you know, might be really helpful. And with all of these things, it's good practice to remind your young clients that they can change their minds at any time and choose again, or they can opt out, or they can take a break whenever they want. Now, this kind of stuff can be new to lots of kids. And also, you know, this idea that if they make a choice, they don't have to stick to it, because, you know, depending on schooling and parenting, kids are taught sometimes, well, you made that decision, you got to stick to it. Or, you know, you chose to sign up for whatever, horse riding, and now I'm after paying for it, so you have to do the lesson. So sometimes kids' option to opt out is actually just not even removed. It's just not even present from the beginning. So explaining that, you know, my sessions and my way of, you know, working with you is different, and you always have an option to opt out. You always have an option to change your mind, and explaining this explicitly and repeatedly may even be necessary. So, you know, it's really good to link all of this stuff that you're talking about then with sessions around consent and boundaries, and how often kids' boundaries are not respected. And, you know, I think that's really part of creating a safe space, or a no affirming space for kids is, you know, I know other people might be saying these things to you, but really, when we have respect for children and their boundaries and their autonomy, we don't do these things. And I'm not going to be doing these things in this session, and maybe I can help other people in your life, you know, respond to you in a different way. So I hope you found that was helpful. And it's always good to remember, I suppose, there's lots of little things going on for the children and teens in our care, and it's good to be mindful of, you know, how we might say something very simple like just pick one, and that's actually really challenging for so many reasons, as we've just talked about. Thanks for listening. Talk to you again soon.